G'day mates, bloody good to have you here. Welcome to another crappy video. We're going to talk about the Rugby World Cup quarterfinal between the All Blacks and Ireland. There is a lot to unpack with this one. I'll give you my thoughts, but this could go either way. Very difficult to pick this one. We've known about it for now about 3 weeks, roughly since the Irish beat South Africa. That pretty much determined first and second in that pool, and we knew about where the All Blacks were going to finish in the pool A based on the result from France versus the All Blacks in the first game of the World Cup many weeks ago. So we're finally there. We finally have team lists, and so we know who's playing, and we can sort of read into that a little bit. I'll run through the teams just quickly, which you can do anyway, but you've got, for Ireland, you've got Porter, Sheehan, Furlong, Byrne, Henderson, Amani, Doris, Van der Fleer, Gibson Park, Sexton, Aki, Ringrose, Alo, Hansen and Keenan. And ultimately that's the same starting lineup as the team that played against Scotland a week ago, and very similar with the exception, I think, of Ryan at lock since the Irish played against South Africa a few weeks ago. So there's not a lot to talk about there, no real surprises, but the main thing is consistency, which is a great advantage, I must admit, and we'll talk about that in a minute. For the All Blacks, we've got De Groot, Taylor, Lomax, Retallick, Barrett, Frizzell, Savia, Kane, Smith, Mo'unga, Barrett, Ioane, Whanganuku, Jordan, Barrett. I must admit, most of that you'd sort of expect as well. And the only sort of exception there is probably Sam Whitelock on the bench. And what I do like about that, and I think the All Blacks have been quite intentional there, is that they're sort of suggesting that Sam Cane as captain might not be able to play the full 80 minutes. It's a good chance he'll come off for Dalton Papali'i, and then Sam Whitelock as sort of probably the other forward leader in the pack. He can finish the game and sort of lead the All Blacks through to the end, which I really like. We haven't seen that before, I don't think, maybe once, but a really bold move, but I think a wise move. Whitelock deserves to start, of course, but I think they've been pretty clear with that. They've gone Dane Coles on the bench at hooker as the backup hooker, and for me, I think probably a little bit of form, but more so experience. And then you've got the Finlay Christie at half, which again an experienced move, but I'd be leaning towards Roygaard there. Myself, that kid's the future. Damien McKenzie's got the backup fly half spot, but he's also going to cover fullback, so you got Barrett that could slot into first five as well, so they've got a few options there, and Leonard Brown as midfield cover. Really, really sound team. No real surprises there. I like what their intentions are, and I think, if we talk about, I'm talking about the All Blacks more than the Irish. The Irish, we've seen this team play quite consistently, so I think there's just that little bit more to talk about with the All Blacks. But Geordie Barrett coming back from injury, it's been quite clear that he has made a difference. He's provided more of a solid platform at second five. He kicks really well, offers a very good kicking option. In terms of kicking, Geordie Barrett's penalty kicks to touch are getting about 10 to 20 metres more, certainly probably than anyone else in the All Blacks, but I feel like he's kicking further than any of the other teams in the competition as well, which I thought, that could be debatable, but he's certainly getting a lot of metres there of penalty kicks to touch. I think Whanganuku was a big pick there over Talia. Whanganuku, I think, probably deserves that spot. He's been in form all year since the Crusaders as well. And then the rest sort of speaks for itself. There's no real surprises there. And I think, we talk about So the All Blacks' past performances, that game against France where Richie Mo'unga and Beauden Barrett in the first half, forget the second half, in the first half, very technically sound, kicking game was spot on, you've got a couple of options there, and we played for territory, or the All Blacks played for territory, and seemed to dominate that first half. The wheels fell off in the second half, but it's a different story. So as we sort of look at the game, we're talking about Ireland versus the All Blacks. A key word that's sort of been talked about a lot is revenge. And so there's probably two parts of revenge there. But you've got Ireland coming across to New Zealand and winning a series in New Zealand for the first time ever, and not many teams do that. You could argue a couple of things there. The Irish were sort of at towards the end of their season, which means that they've had some regular play. But the All Blacks was at the start of their season, and they are always more vulnerable in the first few games of their year. But you can't take anything away from Ireland. They did it, and the All Blacks will be thinking about that. That'll be right at the front of their memory. But then you've also got the Irish in terms of revenge at World Cups. The All Blacks beating the Irish convincingly in the quarterfinal in the 2019 World Cup, the most recent World Cup. And then so that's sort of a little bit of the revenge factor. I think both teams have something to play for or want some revenge back against those two results. And then you've got in the All Blacks, you've got a really key man in Joe Schmidt, and I think this is the first time he's been involved in the All Blacks coaching group against his previous side. He's going to know lots of details about the players and about the style that the Irish play. So there's a lot of insight that the All Blacks can take advantage from in that sense. And I find it quite interesting because it's almost like it was part of the All Blacks plan. They were looking at the draw, a few years out and thinking, well, man, if Joe Schmidt was available, we should really get him involved because that he could be really pivotal to this game. And then in terms of pressure, another key word that everybody's talking about, the teams are talking about. There's always a lot of pressure at this stage of a World Cup now. For the All Blacks, I would argue that this is a different scenario that they used to. They're not favourites to win this game. They've been sort of under the radar, and people have not really thought that the All Blacks. I mean, I know they've been they're always there or thereabouts in terms of odds and things like that, but they have. I must admit, as a fan of the All Blacks, this is the most relaxed I've felt for the All Blacks in a World Cup, and that's I would largely say comes down to the fact that we're not expecting the All Blacks to win. So that's new and a bit weird, but I must admit there's less pressure on them. In terms of the coach, the All Blacks coach, in terms of pressure, you could argue that Ian Foster doesn't have a job at the All Blacks next year. It's already known. He knows it. So he doesn't have to can think about the fact that, well, what will happen to me if we lose or if we win? What happens there? So you can eliminate that from his thought process. Therefore, the way he can approach this, communicate with the players and staff is different. And then you talk about Ireland and pressure, and of course there's pressure there. I mean, they are ranked number 1 in the world at the moment. They haven't won a quarterfinal before, or progressed past quarterfinals and World Cups before. No doubt there's pressure. I mean, there's pressure both sides, but I guess what I'm saying is that you'd feel like there's more pressure on that Irish team and the expectations that go with it, and the All Blacks have had that for a long time. But then you look at Ireland, and you look at the results they've had, you look at the challenges that they've had and what they've been able to do, and you can easily argue that they can handle that sort of pressure. And they are the best team in the world at handling that sort of pressure. I think South Africa is probably right up there. They seem to handle these sorts of, knockout rugby really well. So you'd then say, well, Ireland will handle these sorts of occasions better than the All Blacks. World Cups aside, I think in recent years, Ireland lead that just slightly. And then I just want to sort of talk about tactics just that little bit. We know what the Irish are going to bring. They're going to bring physicality. They're going to bring drive, desire, passion to make tackles, to get there for their teammates. They're going to be niggly at the breakdown. They're going to try and ruffle a few feathers. Amani's definitely going to try and get under the skin of the All Blacks, and their defence is going to be very, very strong. You could see the frustration that Scotland had in that recent game, where they just could not break through that Irish defence, and Irish always came up with, throughout the game, a way to turn that ball over and get themselves out of pressure. And in recent years, I think we talk about the fact that the rest of the world, or certainly European teams, have been lifting their game, getting better and better, getting more competitive against South Africa and the All Blacks and the rest of that. Well, when you look at the strategy and tactics against the All Blacks, the European teams, look, even South Africa do it, and that's a totally different conversation. I'd love to talk about that another day, but the teams are slowing the games against the All Blacks down. Italy didn't really slow it down. They kind of preferred a fast-paced game, and they sort of allowed the All Blacks to really get some momentum, and then it was all over and couldn't keep up, and that momentum in that game kept going. But there's other teams that are better at slowing games down and slowing the momentum down. Ireland are one of the best at it. And so my point of view from that is that, well, in recent years, teams have sort of looked at it and said, well, we can't keep up with the All Blacks. We can't necessarily compete with them. And then these teams have decided that, well, let's, rather than trying to match the All Blacks and beat them at their own game, let's destroy the All Blacks game, or slow it down, get niggly, wind them up, frustrate them, and put them off their game. It's just my thoughts, but look, it's very evident, and that's sort of been the way it's going. But look, it's effective, and we're talking about who will win, not how you win. So, but the All Blacks need to understand that that's what's going to happen. So the Irish will do that, and the All Blacks need to be prepared for that. So I think that's going to be a really deciding factor for this game. Is how the All Blacks respond to Ireland's strong defence and frustrating, niggly, physicality. And so I think that's going to be a huge factor, and probably what it'll come down to. I hope it sort of comes down to how the teams play, rather than refereeing decisions, yellow, red cards, and all the rest of it. So, there's let's just forget about that. Let's just sort of talk about how the teams are going to respond to each other. I do think the Irish team can beat the All Blacks on their own merit. I think if you look at it, they are a better side. The other questions, though, that I have are, can Ireland step up even more? I think that we've seen their ability to, what we see is what we get. I don't know that they've had to sort of keep delivering. They've had to win these big games. Can they lift to another level? I'm not sure. But with the All Blacks, they've been up and down, but their potential is high. If you look at the All Blacks squad or team that's going to be playing against Ireland, a lot of those players were there 4 years ago when they beat Ireland in that quarterfinal. What you have is you do have a lot of experience, and you've got players that have been there and done that before. I think that it's all about sort of everything coming together for the All Blacks to win this game. They need everything to go their way, don't get me wrong. And then you could also argue that the All Blacks are sort of a little underprepared compared to Ireland. They haven't had as many, good physical and challenging encounters throughout this World Cup. The All Blacks last played France. The last real challenge the All Blacks had was many weeks ago against France. So, again, that leans towards Ireland. But I just think that if the All Blacks can play like they did against France in the first half of that first game of the World Cup, and if they can play as clinically as they did against Italy in the first half of that game and most of the second half, then I think that the All Blacks will win if they can do that. Then and if I had to pick a team, this is the hardest part of the whole conversation, isn't it? But in terms of who will win, well, the toss of a coin, honestly. But I think I'm going to go with the All Blacks because I'm biased. But I honestly think the All Blacks are a good chance, and if everything goes right, they can win this game. If the Irish do win, which is most likely, then I really do hope they take this whole thing out. But a France-Ireland final would be absolutely fantastic, and I think the greatest possible result and outcome for this World Cup. Anyway, that's enough for now. If you're still here, thank you so much for listening and watching. I'll try and make another video as soon as I can, and enjoy the rugby this weekend.